Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. US Senate Republicans have narrowly passed President Trump's sweeping tax cut and spending bill, with JD Vance casting a tiebreak vote. The bill will now head to the House, with Trump wanting it signed into law by July the 4th. The Dalai Lama has issued a press release confirming he will be reincarnated, with the trust identifying his successor. China has responded, stating that it must approve who is chosen, as Tibetan exiles celebrate the good news. Gaza's civil defense agency says that Israeli strikes have killed at least 14 people today. It comes as Donald Trump says Israel have agreed to a 60-day Gaza ceasefire, with the US president urging Hamas to commit to what he called a final proposal. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has ordered the suspension of cooperation with the nuclear watchdog IAEA following US and Israeli strikes on its facilities. Russia's Vladimir Putin and French leader Emmanuel Macron discuss Iran's nuclear ambitions. Russian strikes have reportedly targeted Kharkiv, according to the city's mayor, killing one person and wounding another. Meanwhile, Ukrainian lawmakers have called a US decision to pause some arms shipments as painful. President Trump says he is not planning to extend the tariff pause past the 9th of July as negotiations with India, the EU and other countries continue. Japanese leader Shigeru Ishiba says he is determined to protect national interests in discussions. Record temperatures across parts of Europe have continued as 2 people die in France due to heat-related illnesses. Schools remain shut in some regions as outdoor work is limited in Italy due to the harsh conditions. The cause of a fire which led to power outages at Europe's busiest airport was an unrepaired transformer that was found 7 years ago. Hundreds of thousands of passengers were impacted by the chaos of cancelled flights at Heathrow. We start this hour in the Middle East. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has implemented a new law passed by Parliament cutting off cooperation with the UN's nuclear watchdog. The IAEA stated media confirmed the move, which marks a major step in Tehran's standoff with the West. Iran blames the IAEA for siding with Western nations and justifying Israeli airstrikes. Those strikes began just 1 day after the agency's board accused Iran of breaching its commitments under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The law now requires Iran's Supreme National Security Council to approve any future IAEA inspections of the country's nuclear facilities. In a separate development, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that a US bombing raid seriously damaged Iran's Fordo nuclear sites, describing the impact as heavy and severe. Well, joining us to discuss this latest development is my colleague, anchor and correspondent Thomas Porteous, who is joining us in the newsroom. Thomas, this developments following, of course, significant military action against Iran's nuclear sites. What more can you tell us?
Well, Joshua, obviously, because things have simmered down seemingly on the battlefield does not mean that tensions between Tehran and the UN nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, are over. Iran long accuses the UN nuclear watchdog of being against their regime. Iran strongly says that they are enriching uranium for peaceful purposes. The IAEA has come out and said on multiple occasions that that their uranium enrichment is getting towards nuclear grade, and now we've seen threats from IAEA chief Rafael Grossi called across Iran from newspapers alike, some calling for his assassination, and this it only rises the tensions between them both. This obviously risks, without outside intervention, of Iran developing its nuclear program underground, and this is going to raise concerns with the West that an outer body will not be going on and checking Iran's nuclear activities. President Trump, obviously, as you said earlier, made the decision to strike those 3 nuclear facilities, one being Fordo facility with those Buster bombs. He's ruled out, he hasn't ruled out doing it again. He said he might do it again if Iran continues its nuclear development. But as we've said previously, this situation is long from over. Although hostilities have stopped on the battlefield, diplomatically we could see this rise once again, as well as militarily.
Absolutely. Thomas Porteous, thank you for joining us with that insight. We will, of course, continue to monitor that situation in the Middle East regarding Iran's nuclear capabilities. But we move on now, and China's foreign ministry has stated today that the Dalai Lama's succession through his reincarnation must be approved by China's central government. The succession must comply with Chinese laws and regulations, as well as religious rituals and historical conventions. This according to the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning. Here is what they had to say.
活佛转世是藏传佛教特有的传承方式，已经延续了700多年，形成了严密的宗教仪轨和历史定制。达赖、班禅等大活佛转世灵童，需经凭撤签认定，中央政府批准。14世达赖本人就是在13世达赖喇嘛圆寂之后，严格按照宗教仪轨和历史定制寻访，由当时的国民政府颁令特准免于金凭撤签继任的。
Well, this comes after the Dalai Lama said that he will be reincarnated and that his non-profit institution will have the sole authority to identify who is chosen, countering China's insistence that it will choose the successor of the Tibetan Buddhist leader. He made the statement in a video message shown to a gathering in Dharamshala. He added that the Gaden Pondrang Trust has the sole authority to recognise his future reincarnation in consultation with the heads of Tibetan Buddhist traditions. China's foreign ministry has reiterated that Beijing had to approve the identity of the successor and that it had to be done in China through a centuries-old ritual. Well, joining us to discuss this development is Yudon Alkatsan, a Tibetan MP. Yudon, thank you ever so much for joining us. We know, of course, we brought you this earlier today, that the statement had been made from the Dalai Lama. We now have a response from China. I want to ask you about the significance of this moment, not just the Dalai Lama confirming that his reincarnation will take place after his death, but also the comments that China have made.
Well, if you are going back, first of all, to the statement of His Holiness, which we have been eagerly awaiting, and he made the statement at the August gathering of the 15th Tibetan Religious Conference. It's a very, very prestigious conference where all the high lamas of the Tibetan Buddhism and Phön, representatives are there. So he made the statement very clearly. There is 2 important components of the statement. One is that he has affirmed that the institution of the Dalai Lama will continue. Secondly, that the sole responsibility, although he has the sole authority, the responsibility of it will be for the search and the recognition will be with the Office of Tibet, Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It's called the Gandhin Podrang in Tibetan. And so when China is trying to respond to that, China has over the years tried to meddle in the reincarnation of Tibetan lamas. In 2007, they in fact passed a law governing the reincarnation of high lamas. But China cannot, has not, and will not be able to rule the hearts and minds of Tibetans. It's about Tibetan religion, Tibetan identity, Tibetan culture. They have tried in the past. You have seen the example of Panchen Lama. They have not succeeded.
Absolutely. Just a very quick comment as well. I'll just come back to you briefly, Yudon. I do want to look at that Chinese response and that relationship. Can you provide some context? Obviously, the situation between China and the Tibetan people has been a strained one. Could you inform us about how that has been over recent times and the significance of this moment in that relationship?
Well, China has really occupied Tibet since it took over, and complete occupation of Tibet happened in 1959. Since that, we have actually attempted to find a solution to the China-Tibet conflict, but we have not been able to. For the last many years, there's a stalled negotiation. We are attempting to have a negotiation with China on a solution, a right, meaningful solution to the Tibetan problem. But so far, we've not gotten the China to come on table, to the negotiating table.
Yes, Yudon, you will be staying with us because we are looking at the reactions to that announcement that was made earlier by the Dalai Lama, and Tibetans in exile living in the northern Indian town of Dharamshala, where the Dalai Lama has been living for most of the past 65 years, have said that they are happy to hear the good news after the spiritual leader said the trust he founded will lead the search for his successor. The remarks by the leader, who turned 90 in July, came during a week of celebrations to mark his birthday. The remarks end long-time speculation among millions of followers about whether there would be another Dalai Lama after his death. Beijing views the Dalai Lama, who fled to India from Tibet in 1959 after a failed uprising against Chinese rule, as a separatist. The Dalai Lama has previously said his successor will be born outside of China and urged his followers to reject anyone chosen by Beijing. Let's have a listen to some of what his followers have had to say after the announcement.
We are very glad, to hear this good news. Very, very great news for me, for Lingor. Thank you very much.
Why is it very great news?
Because he is our living Buddha. He's a compassionate leader. He's a compassionate for the world. He's the only thinking for the world, not the only thinking for the India, or not for the Tibetan. He's thinking about all world. Everyone is giving respect to him. So I'm very glad to hear this thing.
It's very important. I feel his Institute of Dalai Lama is continuous. Of course, it's very, very important. So not even for the Tibetan people, it's important for this Mother Earth. So it's very important. It's continuous. He always promised the people of the Tibetans, special for the Tibetans, and inside the Tibet and outside the Tibet, he always promised, I come. If I come in a free country, not in a dictatorship on other countries, he comes in a free country and he continues his 14 Dalai Lama's job left. He can continue what this is.
Well, Yudon, thank you ever so much for staying with us. We've heard a couple of responses there to that news. I wondered if we could just get some context on the significance of the Dalai Lama and why there is so much happiness around the confirmation of a reincarnation.
Well, His Holiness is the living Buddha. For us Tibetans, he has been the unifying force, the one that's a beacon of hope for us, for our aspirations. He is the symbol of our aspiration. And for the last many, many years, he has, with his vision, we've been able to have a democratic system in India. Not just for the Tibetans, he's also been a great leader for the world, for universal responsibility, for secular ethics, for nonviolence and peace. So we actually rejoice. We are all rejoicing and celebrating his 90th birthday. And we have one more cause to celebrate, the fact that he has decided that the next incarnation will happen. Yes. We are very, very pleased.
Absolutely. Yudon Alkatsang, thank you ever so much for joining us. We are going to move on to Europe now, and a Russian drone attack has set a building in central Kharkiv, Ukraine, on fire and damaged others. This according to the regional mayor, Ihor Terekov. Local emergency services have published video footage showing firefighters extinguishing flames at the site. The strike came as the Pentagon halted some shipments of air defense missiles and other precision munitions to Ukraine over concerns that US stockpiles are too low, this according to reports. Ukraine has summoned a US diplomat to express deep concern over recent delays in promised military aid, warning that any pause in weapons and ammunition deliveries will only encourage Russia to intensify its attacks. The Foreign Ministry has also said that such gaps would make it difficult for Ukrainian forces to defend itself against Russia. Fedir Vinislavsky, a member of the Ukrainian Parliament's National Security and Defence Committee, has also called the decision to halt the shipments very unpleasant for Ukraine. The delayed shipments include air defence interceptors, critical for shooting down Russian drones and missiles. In recent weeks, Russia has reportedly intensified air attacks on Ukraine's cities on several nights, launching hundreds of drones and missiles at a time, leading to widespread damage and an increase in civilian casualties. Well, joining us to discuss this update, Georgi Talaraya, a professor at the Institute of China and Contemporary Asia of Russian Academy of Science. Thank you very much for joining us, Georgi. Let's look at this move from the United States. Of course, pausing some aid that had been pledged, the significance of that aid as well, assets that would help stop and limit the damage caused by these Russian assaults across Ukraine. How truly significant is this? And is there anybody that's able to plug that gap that the US are leaving?
Well, it's actually just a temporary break in the supplies of several types of armaments, which is not a full stop in armament supply, which we all hope for, because I think that only this can enable the Ukrainian side to start negotiations on the final solution to the conflict. And I'm not sure why this drone attack against the military target in Kharkov is given so much attention. Actually, the Ukrainian drones, hundreds of them, are flying over Russia every night. And I'm sitting in Moscow, and every night we hear the drones coming. There are hundreds of them all over Russia. Another one hit Izhevsk, the city of Izhevsk, which is 100 miles away from Ukrainian border. It's deep into Russia, and it's damaged the plant, and there were several casualties. So this is much more, I think, interesting and should be reported. Not a single strike on Kharkov in Russian fact. And I believe that this move by the US is too little too late, but hopefully we're moving in the right direction.
Yes, Georgi, if you stay with us, because we have a related development, and many farmers and local residents in Ukraine have started taking on the dangerous work of clearing landmines themselves, as more than 3 years at war with Russia have left huge areas of farmland and villages littered with unexploded devices. While professional deminers are more than 80 NGOs and commercial teams are working around the clock, the scale of contamination is vast, and communities feel they have no choice but to step in to speed up the process. The international community has also pledged major support for the unprecedented clean-up effort. Clearing the land is crucial not just for safety, but also to restore Ukraine's agricultural backbone. This push comes just as President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a decree withdrawing Ukraine from the Ottawa Convention, which bans the production and use of anti-personnel landmines. Zelensky said the move is necessary given Russia's tactics and for defending Ukraine's territory after more than 40 months of brutal conflict. Ukraine ratified the Ottawa Convention in 2005, but now joins other countries bordering Russia like Finland, Poland and the Baltic states that have either pulled out or signalled they may do so. Kyiv says this decision reflects the harsh choices it must make to protect its people and reclaim land still riddled with deadly explosives. Well, Georgi, thank you for staying with us. This a signal and a clear example of how the war is devastating and impacting communities, not just through loss of life. The role of demining, of course, a specialist task, but civilians taking it upon themselves. How important is it that the agricultural backbone of Ukraine gets up and running at a time of difficulty at war economically?
Hello?
Hello, Georgie.
Yes, I'm not sure I'm ready to comment on Ukrainian regime measures because I'm more concerned with the damage done to Russian economy by the Ukrainian incursion into Kursk region, which was brutal, and other strikes on certain economic objects and economic infrastructure. I'm certainly not the one who can judge what Ukrainians are doing, but I think it's better for them just to take the measures to eliminate the damage done from the war by ending it.
Yes, absolutely. Georgie Tolaraya, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing your insight. From the Russia-Ukraine war, we move to the Middle East, and Israel's top diplomat is urging that no opportunity be missed to free hostages held in Gaza. This comes after US President Donald Trump called on Hamas to accept a 60-day ceasefire, which he says has Israel's backing. Trump's appeal urges Hamas to accept what he described as a final proposal. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar, without directly referencing Trump's comments, said a large majority of the Israeli government and public supports a plan to free hostages, adding if the opportunity arises, it must not be missed. Of the 251 hostages seized during Hamas's 2023 7th of October attack that triggered this war, 49 remain in Gaza, including 27 the Israeli military say are dead. Meanwhile, civil defense officials reported at least 14 deaths from strikes today. In southern Gaza, civil defense officials say 5 members of a family were killed in an Israeli strike on a tent sheltering displaced people in al-Musawi. Officials report 4 people were killed in Gaza City and another 5 in a drone strike on central Deir al-Balah. Hamas's October 7th attack killed 1,219 people in Israel, mostly civilians. Israel's military response has killed a reported 56,647 people in Gaza, also mostly civilians. That figure according to the health ministry in the Hamas-run territory. Well, joining us once again is my colleague, anchor and correspondent, Thomas Porteous from the newsroom. Thomas, let's look at this Gaza ceasefire deal. We've been here before. We've heard ceasefire proposals going from either side, a Steve Witkoff deal in the past, but Trump has signalled this might be the last chance. What more can you tell us?
Well, as the Iran and Israel conflict came to a close, now everyone's attention is now once again turning back to the Gaza Strip. We've seen Benjamin Netanyahu and now obviously Donald Trump with his Truth Social tweet signal optimism, but also the fact that he is called as a final proposal, signalling some strain in these negotiations. As you said previously, this has happened before. We've heard optimism. We've had a ceasefire deal that was announced on January the 19th that then Israel broke back in March. However, this is a 60-day ceasefire break. It's not a full end to the war that's being proposed here. It's a break in hostilities. And now what we know from Hamas is that they want a full end to the war. That's not what's being proposed here. It's a 60-day ceasefire. Netanyahu's will has also signally changed over the past few days. We have seen him in a press conference signal bringing the hostages home as a top priority. That wasn't previously the case. Previously, his top aim was always to destroy Hamas. But it's hard to look on this situation with a whole lot of optimism, especially when you see what's going on the ground. The humanitarian situation is worsening. As you've mentioned previously, there's been a reported 14 deaths in the Gaza Strip, constant today alone, with some outlets and some reports saying more. Khan Yunis and Rafah have both been hit today. in regards to a ceasefire, we have been at this situation before. One can only hope things do develop with the mediators of Qatar and Egypt, but we'll have to follow this situation going forward and hope that negotiations continue in order to bring positive news. Thank you, Josh.
Yes, Thomas, thank you very much for that insight. We will, of course, continue to monitor the situation in the Middle East. We move on now, and China has announced that Premier Li Qiang will visit Brazil and Egypt next week. He's set to attend the 17th BRICS Summit in Rio de Janeiro from July the 5th to July the 8th. Beijing calls BRICS a key platform for emerging markets to boost cooperation and push for a fairer multipolar world. After Brazil, Premier Li will make an official visit to Egypt from July the 9th to 10th. China's foreign ministry says he will hold talks with Egyptian leaders to strengthen bilateral ties and discuss regional issues. This visit comes as Beijing seeks a greater role in global diplomacy. China has positioned itself as a Middle East mediator, brokering the 2023 deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran as well. Well, joining us to discuss this development is Zhong Qi, a CGTN anchor who is joining us from Beijing. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Let's first look at this BRICS meeting. What do you think will be the key topics discussed in Brazil?
Joshua, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. I've covered many BRICS summits in the past, and I can tell you the agenda priorities shift from year to year. So they're a little different each year, depending on, of course, the overall economic landscape in the world and the geopolitical situations. But there are recurring topics and themes which indicate just exactly how important they are. For example, the issue of trade and investment facilitation, which always features prominently at this summit. So leaders can very much sit down and talk about further reduced trade barriers, improve business environment, and further promote the free flow of goods and capital within the BRICS mechanism. I do want to also mention mechanism building. I know that sounds dry, but it's absolutely important because BRICS is getting bigger now. With new members come in, they each coming with a different set of priorities, with different development needs, and they're themselves in different economic phases. So it remains absolutely critical to coordinate these different needs and see where synergy can arise, and how do we move in the same direction? How do we build consensus? So I do believe that there will be discussions necessary concerning the improvement of internal cooperation mechanism and improve the efficiency of the organization. And now the topic on everybody's mind, artificial intelligence, which has been a trendy and hot topic throughout the past year and this year also. But there are different layers to this issue. The first is on the technology side. There exists a digital divide between developed countries and developing countries. Certainly, developed countries hold advantages in developing AI-related technology, but developing countries don't want to miss out on the opportunity here. And the other one concerns the global AI governance. This is still a relatively new phenomenon across the world, and developing countries want their say at the very start of this phenomenon in terms of how to regulate AI to ensure that AI is used in a responsible manner to benefit their interests. So I do think there will be efforts to reach consensus on the needs to regulate AI, and that the application of AI to be more fair, transparent, and in line with global interests.
Yes.
As we mentioned, Brazil is playing host this year to the BRICS Summit, but Brazil will also be hosting the United Nations Climate Change Conference. So it is my personal belief that Brazil will use this opportunity to shed light on our climate actions and our climate response, focusing on improving the financing structure for a climate change response. Member countries may discuss how to strengthen cooperation in green energy, carbon reduction, and etc. Joshua?
Yes, absolutely. I now want to look at China's role and contributions to the BRICS agenda. How will that play out in 2025 and then the years to come?
As you know, Joshua, China is a founding member of BRICS. It's the biggest economy among member countries, and it certainly values trade cooperation within the bloc. It has forged a very robust and healthy relationship, and I should also mention ever-growing relationship with member countries. So it definitely wants to safeguard that relationship and keep it growing. One of the initiatives put forward by China can be seen in the 2025 BRICS Economic and Trade Forum, which was held earlier in Beijing this year. On that forum, talks focused on promoting trade among member countries through what is known as standard cooperation. And what that means is that obviously products originating from different countries are manufactured with different standards. It would benefit the efficiency of the trading process if products can meet unified standards, can meet common standards. It would speed things up. It would mean streamlining the trading process. It's only one of the initiatives that China put forward this year. But overall, I do think China will reinforce the support for multilateralism, especially multilateralism in trade. Why is that important this year? Because in 2025, we're witnessing a time when trade protectionism is on the rise so blatantly, and that tariffs are being deployed as weapons against certain countries. China opposes that, and China has made it abundantly clear that it firmly defends the multilateral trading system and supports the role of the WTO, and at the same time, it wishes, against this backdrop, to implement a practical trade and economic cooperation on the ground with member countries. And China has always supported the expansion of BRICS, what is known as BRICS plus cooperation, in order to improve the representation of BRICS and enabling more developing countries and emerging economies to participate in international affairs, which is a great measure in practice to support multilateralism. I do want to point out that there are accusations out there that say China wants to dominate BRICS. And it is absolutely a mistake to view China and China's role in BRICS that way, because BRICS was, founded based on principles of inclusiveness, openness, women cooperation. The mechanism put in place at the very start of the founding of BRICS prevents a scenario from that from happening. For example, if you look at the rotating presidency, each country takes presidency in a rotating manner, and each country has the opportunity to set the agenda for the summit and determines the direction in which the summit develops. And also, if you look at the New Development Bank, all founding members have equal voting rights, which constitutes a democratic governance structure. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there, misconstrued concept about China's role in BRICS. It's a great opportunity to take the time and clarify things up a little bit. I do want to briefly mention China's position on climate issues and green transformation. China promotes the full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement, supports differentiated responsibilities, and urges developed countries to fulfill their obligations under the agreement. Joshua.
Yes, absolutely. And you talking about BRICS there, of course, in 2023, 6 new members joining. And I want to look at how that expansion strengthens the BRICS commitments to raise the voices and standing of developing countries.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, Joshua. I mean, the expansion has been a very welcome move embraced by member countries. And I do believe new members bring new vitality, new impetus, and new energy into the group. First of all, they get to strengthen their policy coordination and strategic coordination with the new members. Now, BRICS accounts for about 45% of the global population, about a third of the global GDP. So on paper, in numbers, this is a mightier group. This is a mightier force. And what that means is that new members can strengthen strategic coordination on key regional as well as international issues, and together safeguard international justice and fairness. This is about enhancing the overall international footprint, international influence, if you will. But these new members, they also come in with their respective strengths, advantages, and resources. For example, if you look at the new members, some of them are oil-rich countries. So they bring new perspectives and new thinking on energy. We're talking about both energy security and energy transition. Energy security, on the energy security front, obviously it encompasses discussions on stabilizing energy supplies, energy prices. On the transition front, just because these are major oil exporters and fossil fuel powerhouses doesn't mean they're not thinking about transition. They want to diversify their economy. They want to diversify their exports. So they're thinking also in line with renewable energy projects, and that's very important. Their perspectives will be very much needed and appreciated at the BRICS grouping. And if you look at the UAE, it's got rich experience in constructing financial centers, and its technology innovation has been spoken very highly of. I believe UAE coming to the table will also enrich the topics and dialogues at hand here. And Egypt and Ethiopia can offer opportunities in agriculture and infrastructure. Obviously, it definitely, I think, strengthens South-South cooperation, not just these new members. We have a few dozen countries out there that have either expressed interest in joining as full members or as partner countries. This says to me that the appeal of BRICS is still there. It is still growing, and the new members show the desire of emerging economies to unite and to cooperate, which helps to narrow the North-South gap and promote more balanced development.
Yes, and you mentioned earlier, of course, China a founding member. India also a founding member of BRICS and have played a positive role in its operation. What do you make of India's participation in the group?
As you say, India also is a founding member, and I think it's fair to say India has played a very important role in the development of BRICS in terms of investment in economy, both in terms of making investments and receiving investments, also in terms of digital economy, in terms of tapping into the strengths that the Indian economy has to offer. If you look at the Indian economy itself, I think it still registers an impressive growth number, right? Just above 6%. But domestically, that growth number is slowing because you have high inflation. You have slow wage growth, weighing down on the economic growth, which in turn strains the economy. What BRICS offers India is great market space, and India has taken advantage of that. India has strengthened trade exchanges with members. Its trade volume has been increasing steadily. Intra-BRICS, it has also obtained a large amount of investment on infrastructure building and sustainability projects, resulting in India's economic foundation improvement and industrial competitiveness. Also, I want to mention, I think a lot of people may not be aware of this, but India has been a strong supporter of international financial institution building within the BRICS mechanism, which has paved the way for the establishment of the New Development Bank, a key milestone of BRICS. This is a multilateral financial institution that gives loans to verified projects in terms of infrastructure building and sustainability projects. And I seem to remember a rural water supply project in Himachal Pradesh in India, where they draw the water from the plain area of the country, store it in huge water tanks, and through pipelines deliver the water to individual rural households. And as a result, 500,000 villagers now have access to tap water. So as a result, 500,000 people, their lives have been made easier with projects sponsored by the New Development Bank. I don't know if I'm sure they're not aware that this project was made possible with a loan from the New Development Bank, but if they did know, I think they'd be very proud of their government. They'd be very proud of its participation in BRICS and its support behind the New Development Bank. I want to also mention that India has many known advantages and strengths in industrial competitiveness. We're counting IT services, we're counting softwares, we're counting pharmaceuticals. I'm sure India will tap into the full potential of that competitiveness to expand cooperation with member countries that will, member countries that need the expertise and know-how, and especially the very talented Indian people that make up a very strong workforce. Joshua.
Yes, absolutely. We are running shorter on time, but just very briefly, before we let you go, I just wanted to look at global governance and what changes that BRICS is hoping to bring to that.
I want to point out that when some people hear that BRICS want to advocate for global governance, they immediately think of changing the status quo or replacing the existing international order. And that couldn't be farther from the truth, because first, BRICS was not founded out of a confrontation or replacement mentality. It doesn't serve the interests of BRICS members or the vision of BRICS. What BRICS wants is, first of all, to uphold the UN system, that the authority of the United Nations must be respected, must be upheld. BRICS does believe in addressing international affairs, maintaining world peace and stability by the UN system, but it does see the necessary needs to reform, for example, the existing international financial structure, the components that make up the international financial system, institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. So focus could be on reviewing the equity structure of the World Bank, the quota share structure at the IMF. Both are directly related to the voting rights of the countries in these institutions. The overarching view is that developing countries are poorly represented. There's not sufficient representation for emerging economies. And I do believe emerging economies and developing countries have a right to speak up on this matter, and in line with the changing economic situation, demand that their voices be heard and amplified on the international stage. That is about the global governance reform that BRICS has been advocating, not about replacing anyone, not about subverting any existing international order. I think the right term here is supplementing the international system as we see it, so that more members of the Global South are represented here. Joshua.
Yes, Zhongxi, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us and discuss this upcoming BRICS summit. We will, of course, here on NewsX World bring you all of those developments during that summit as we get them. But we move on now to some breaking news we've just received. And according to reports, a military helicopter from the African Union peacekeeping mission in Somalia has crashed at the airport in the capital, Mogadishu, and was engulfed in flames. This, according to the state-run news outlet. The helicopter from the African Union Support and Stabilization Mission in Somalia was carrying 8 personnel when it crashed during landing. That also, as per local media. We will bring you that confirmation when we get it. But local media have also added that the fire has now been contained. More on that as soon as we hear it. We'll head back now, though, to the Middle East. And Hamas has said that it is open to a ceasefire with Israel, but stopped short of accepting the US-backed plan announced by President Donald Trump that we brought you earlier. The group insists any deal must bring a full end to the war in Gaza. Trump said earlier that Israel had agreed to a 60-day ceasefire and urged Hamas to accept the deal, warning that conditions will only worsen if they don't. He said the pause would be used to work towards ending the war. However, this is a goal that Israel rejects until Hamas is defeated. A Hamas official said the group is ready and serious about an agreement, but only one that leads to a full Israeli withdrawal and the end of the war. An Israeli official said the proposal includes a partial withdrawal and more humanitarian aid, but no commitment to end the war. Trump is expected to host Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House next week. The war, which began in October of 2023, has seen the death of over 56,000 in Gaza and displacement of much of the population, according, of course, that death toll to local officials. Well, joining us once again from the newsroom, Thomas Portius, anchor and correspondent Thomas, we brought earlier and we spoke to you earlier about this US ceasefire deal that Israel have reportedly backed Hamas with a different stance. What can you tell us?
Well, yes, Josh, finally some optimism coming out of the region, a possible end to an almost 21-month war. Hamas says it's open to a 60-day pause in the war, but then reiterates its point that it does want this to lead to a full end to the war. Donald Trump has not mentioned that. Israel still remains that its full aim is to completely dismantle Hamas. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu has once again said that returning hostages is a priority, something that Hamas has had a history of. They once again, they demand a full pullout of these Israeli troops. As you've said, we will be following this situation closely with that possible meeting with US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is set to possibly visit Washington within the next week, and we will see how this situation develops. But once again, reiterating a huge development from the region and possible optimism coming out of this.
Yes, Thomas, thank you for joining us. Potential optimism, but still work to do in the Middle East. We'll bring you all of those updates today and across the rest of the week. But that is, for now, all we have time for. We'll bring you all of the latest from across the world here on NewsX World.